Today we've got a great malicious compliance story all about building a permanent structure. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, annoy me while I'm trying to make the shopping list? Okay then. Kind of a small one, but lately my dad and my older brother have been trying to push the job of making the shopping list onto me. Of course, because I don't know how much they need since I'm the least food-interested person in the house, I need someone's help with making the list. As dad had gone to bed, my brother helped me. Well, he helped me. He would sit there and tell me which item I needed to check, one at a time, and give me a vague or stupid answer as to how much we needed of something. For example, we needed 35 tubs of mint ice cream, or the amount of beer we needed was a fridge. And I was getting annoyed, especially because he was trying to watch a movie at the time and kept pausing and unpausing it between items, so I had to deal with him always telling me to shut up and wait for the end of the scene or a good time to pause, which took several minutes per item for a full shopping list for 3 people and a cat. Did I mention it was like 11:45 p.m. when we started doing this? And this is after he had dragged his feet on helping for 3 days? Eventually, I got sick of it and started writing exactly what he said when it came to his foodstuffs. So we needed an amount of veggie burgers, just guess of tuna, shut up, this is a good bit of dark cooking chocolate, and look at the silly moggy of butternut squash and so on. By the time we were done, it was past 2 a.m. and I was knackered, stressed, and satisfied with my work. I took the list upstairs to my dad, left it on his bedside table with a sticky note that said, "If anything looks wrong, just don't get it." In the morning, Dad went to do the shopping. He came back with everything I eat and what he eats, but my brother was missing about 85% of his food items. When my brother asked what happened, my dad said that he couldn't tell whether we needed to get some things because the amount of those things seemed unusual or costly, and felt that it was safer if he didn't buy those things. It turns out that Dad had been kept awake by my brother's movie for 2.5 hours last night and was as sick to the back teeth with it as I was. My brother had to walk up to the local shop and buy as many of his things as he could from there, they didn't have everything, out of his own money. He even had to make 2 trips because he couldn't carry everything the first time. It's a mile walk there, meaning he had to walk 4 miles in total to buy his food out of his pocket. Dad wouldn't drive him because he had a long run to do, and I sure as heck wasn't going to help. I was too busy eating my Pringles that I forgot to put on the list. I'm still going to have to help make the list in the future, but when I do, something tells me my 27-year-old brother will help properly next time. I think the biggest bombshell of this story is OP saying that they're 27 and they're acting like that. I'm not trying to trash anybody that still lives with their parents at 27, but when they act like that when they're just trying to make a shopping list, does it get any less surprising? Brooke B79 wrote, "They're very well old enough to make up their own lists. Get 3 sheets of paper, put each name at the top of each paper, maybe 4 if you want to have a separate one for communal or household items. Every time one of them notices something they're low on or the household needs, they're responsible for putting it on the paper. If it's not there, it doesn't get bought. Get your own supplies of TP and such so you're not stuck without when they invariably forget to put it on the list. Honestly, writing it down immediately when it's noticed there's a need is the best way. Things don't get forgotten, and you're not running around last minute trying to figure out what's needed." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is back when I scheduled a machine shop. Okay, this is sort of a back in the day malicious compliance. I was swing expediter / scheduler / shop assistant. I didn't run the machines, I just helped get done what's needed to be done on our shift. Had an old school machinist come in at start of shift and explain the blueprint was wrong, and if he followed the attached manufacturing procedure, it was going to result in a bad part. He showed me the issue and I agreed right away. Said I'd catch the engineer before shift the next day. Call engineer, he says, "It's right, just do it." Call him again next day, same result. Move it up a level, and he storms into our office ticked off on the 3rd day. I try and show him the drawing and procedure, but he insists it's correct. He tells me I have no idea what we're doing in our shop. Just follow the procedure as it's written. I had logged all of the calls, etc., and asked if he would put that in writing, and he does. Cue malicious compliance. I go to the same machinist, tell him the issue, it's a 16-hour job. He sits and reads for 2 days and then hands paperwork, no part, into quality control, They check measurements and confirm it was manufactured correctly. They ask, "What's going on? Where's the part?" I come by and explain that according to both the drawing and procedure, the machinist was to machine a 12-inch part down to just over 13 inches shorter than it started at. Thus, the produced product, nothing. Usual ask about why did we do this? I showed them the records I had, so they wrote it up as a procedure issue. 2 days later, same engineer storms in, but brought his boss, the one I initially went to when I got no response, and starts accusing me of sabotaging his part. I calmly show both of them everything, explain that we knew it was an issue and tried to fix it, but we were overridden. Boss looks at engineer and says, "Why aren't you listening to people that are trying to help?" And the engineer replies, "They didn't go to college to become an engineer, they don't know what they're talking about," and walks out. I look at boss and he says, "We will get you a revised procedure and drawing. I assume you still actually have the original stock to make it from?" I laughed and told him I wasn't stupid. Of course I do. Engineer was no longer with the firm a couple weeks later. I would have been upset if this dude did not get at least severely reprimanded. OP essentially said, "We went to them and showed them exactly where it shows. There is a 12-inch part that is scheduled to have 13 inches removed from it." And the person they showed it to stamped it and said, "Yes, it's right, do it," and argued on that point. How much more exposing do you have to do that this person did not do any of their job? Either that or are totally incompetent at it. Reinventing Wheels wrote, "My brother was a machinist back in the day of hand-drafted blueprints and manually operated machine tools. He told of a similar incident, along the lines of a print that specified a hole that was larger diameter than the piece it was to be drilled in. The engineer dismissed his concerns. He went to his machine, gathered up a handful of metal chips, went back to the engineer a while later, and dumped the chips on his desk. Here's your half-inch hole drilled through a 3/8-inch bushing, just like you designed it." Our next story is, insist on your mileage sheets monthly? Okay, boss, you'll get your paperwork in spades. True story regarding the beautiful Emerald Isle and petty revenge on an overbearing, newly promoted boss. This beautiful country of ours has a fairly low population density, generally for reasons dating back to the infamous famine. Watch Black 47 for reference. It also, however, has layer upon layer of civil servants and bureaucracy. We have a beautiful system of government where we have 2 houses and a representative for every 30,000 people as a fact of law. Underneath that, we have a local government system with local authorities in each county and city, each with their own elected councilors and administration. Planning, fire safety roads, refuse collection, and some other things are administrated by these local councils, which leads to the public service being the largest employers in the country. All in an island with a southern republic that has an area of 26,000 square miles, with at the time about 31 or 32 local authorities, and a population of 5.5 million plus or minus. It's totally over the top, but that's a discussion for another day. Anyhow, while we're working for one such local authority as a senior executive engineer, a fire officer, my good friend, an extremely intelligent civil engineer, had the misfortune of being gifted with a new boss, a spanking clean, brand new in box, county engineer in his first role in that position, full of the proverbial pea and vinegar. Now, this particular county was landlocked by other counties and is a particularly odd shape, with a brand new motorway going through it. There are many parts of the county that the only way to get to by road is through other counties. This is important. Most staff use their own cars, and once a month you filled out your mileage sheets, sent it to your direct line manager for sign-off, who sent it up the chain and claimed it back at a rate of so much per mile. It was often a nice addition to the paycheck, and more than covered the cost of maintaining and running the vehicle. If you crossed your LA's boundary, you had to fill out another sheet explaining why, and get it signed off by your line manager. Under their previous boss, they had devised a system where no one had to bother with the mileage sheets necessarily on a monthly basis, and could let it slide for a few months and then submit them all together and get a nice bonus in one lump. Nice if you had a special occasion or a holiday coming up, an easy savings plan, if you will. No one bothered with the second sheet because you crossed the boundary so many times a week that they became irrelevant. Cue new boss's arrival, who insisted on doing everything by the book. Didn't like the way that things worked previously and was going to sort it all out, straighten out everything, and kick everyone into line. He called everyone into a meeting, explained what he was doing in his best authoritative manner, and insisted on monthly submittal of all expenses and mileage sheets and everything listed down to the finest detail, including reasons for your trips, etc., and they had to be explained fully and in detail. Otherwise, the mileage sheets would be sent back unsigned. My friend and the rest of the staff went away from the meeting wondering how they were going to deal with this new way of working. After a few days stewing, my friend came up with a solution to the issue and then called his workmates. They had a little discussion amongst themselves about how to deal with things and came up with a plan for petty revenge. Everyone under the direction of the new boss found that the extreme ends of the county is where they were needed to work that month. The staff then slightly redesigned all of their trips so that they crossed county boundaries multiple times a day, 6 days a week. At the end of month 1, this plan culminated with the submission of thousands of permission confirmation sheets to cross the county boundary to be signed by the new CE after his first month. It took him over 4 weeks to get through that batch, and on week 4, after receiving the second month's batch, all the senior staff were called into a meeting, the agenda of which was kept very hush-hush. The only thing that ever came out of that meeting was a quiet word from the senior staff that everything was going back to the way it used to work. A perfect teaching moment, and petty revenge combined. Anytime I hear a story like this, I think about some imaginary guy who faked it till they made it so far that all of a sudden they're on like the bomb defusal squad, and they're sent in with their super padded suit and they see this little box here with like 12 different wires on it. Okay, bomb defusal man, you said you had 12 years of experience, go ahead. A guy like this who goes and changes things up or institutes a new rule or changes a rule without ever even researching the job or how things have worked so well or haven't worked so well up to that point. To me, it's the same thing as this bomb defusal guy just going, okay, I'm just gonna snip this one wire then. It's no surprise it blew up. Squirreltail wrote, classic Chesterton's fence moment. Never change a rule until you know why the rule is in place, even and sometimes especially if it's an informal rule. Boss should have asked, why isn't this done by the book, rather than demand it be done by the book. Academic Nectarine 94 added, I love that story. I'd never heard it had a name till I read his book, but I'd heard a lot of leadership mentors talk about how new managers shouldn't change anything till they're at a job for about 3 months at least. Obviously, things happen they'll need to address, but if they can help it, it's best not to mess with things till they know what's up. It could also be argued that they won't even know how to do their job till then, and it's important that they have some understanding of the other jobs involved as well. Our next story is, boss says, I don't need your input, just do what I say. So my wife is having some issues at her work with multiple people of different levels of management telling her different things to do depending on who's the manager on duty at the moment. I said she should do what the acting manager told her to do, and when another manager came on duty complaining about what she was doing, to relay what the previous manager had told her and to let them work it out. I also said that she should document everything so that she could relate it to HR if it became necessary to do so. I then explained to her about malicious compliance and what it meant. This started me thinking about an incident at my old job at a manufacturing plant about 12 years ago. The building had 2 areas, a production/packaging area and an attached shipping and receiving warehouse. The production area was air-conditioned and heated. The warehouse was heated but only had roof exhaust fans and no AC, so it got pretty hot in the summer, but was bearable. We just moved slower. On end of Friday, we closed all the dock doors and shut off the exhaust fans and closed the overhead door that separated the warehouse from the production areas. During the week, the overhead was open but had those plastic flap strips you could drive a forklift through to keep the cool air in production. One Friday, the newish manager, who spent little actual time in that building, told us that we should keep the fans on and the separation overhead door open during the weekend to keep the temperature cooler in the warehouse. Why he cared, I really can't fathom. We tried to explain to him that with the dock doors closed, the roof fans would simply suck all of the cold air out of the production area, but he blew us off with the standard, "You will do as I instruct you to do." So, cue malicious compliance. Monday comes that morning in July, and it was hot as heck in the production area. The warehouse was the same temperature as always, and the coils on the production AC units had frozen, and we had to have people come out and service them. All the manager had to say was, Keep that separation overhead door closed at all times. I just gotta point out I love the first paragraph of setup of I instructed my wife how to do malicious compliance. By the way, that reminded me of a story from 12 years ago. That said, as somebody that thrives in cooler temperatures, something like this would probably drive me crazy. Academic Nectarine 94 wrote, "Keep us updated on if she does any malicious compliance. I feel bad for her. I had managers like that pulled me from my department, and then I'd get an unofficial talking to for not being in my department. I didn't mind helping others, but getting a line of people angry because they weren't helped fast, and being told I needed to somehow not be found by managers and stay in my department was very frustrating." Our next story is permanent structure? Okay. I grew up in an okay town that has since become a bit snobbier. I was driving my old street last year, and I saw my old neighbor, Andrea, sitting on her front porch, so I stopped in to say hi. Turning into the driveway, I noticed a regulation-sized soccer goal in her next-door neighbor's small front yard, which is very out of sync with the rest of the neighborhood. It made me laugh a little. After a quick catch-up, I learned a couple of things. She's the last of my old neighbors who still lives on the street, and the neighborhood has become very keeping up with the Joneses, with the exception of her next-door neighbor. I asked about the soccer goal, and here's the story. The neighbor has a young daughter who loves soccer. She would spend hours in the front yard kicking goals into a small goal anchored in the front yard with tent spikes. Apparently, another neighbor, they don't know who, but they suspect the people directly across the street, complained to the township because of the semi-permanent structure in the front yard. The neighbor got upset. Obviously, it was basically a toy in the front yard. Cops came to their house, they got a warning, then they thought it would be okay as long as they took it down when they weren't home, but nope. Cops were called again and they were fined while the daughter was using it. The fine said something about having a semi-permanent because of the tent stakes structure. Cue malicious compliance. They weren't allowed to have a semi-permanent structure, but they could have a permanent structure. So they got a permit from the township, dug the holes, filled it with concrete, and built a regulation-sized goal, and hung the permit on one of the poles. Now the mystery neighbor has to look at that goal every day. I just flat out love this story. I'm a person who loves basketball, so if I had a house like that on that street, it would probably be realistic to expect me to have one of those hoops outside. And honestly, if I had to, if somebody was complaining about some portable hoop and I was starting to get warnings from cops, I would definitely pony up to get some professional in-the-ground permanent hoop setup just to spite that person. IQ wrote, "On 101 north of San Francisco, there was a horse pasture on one side of the road with an enormous wooden dining table, about 11 feet high, and two similarly sized chairs at each end. Turns out the local permit freaks wouldn't allow the owner a permanent structure to shade his horses, but made exceptions for artwork, where no permit was needed." Our next story is, okay, really old one. The comments in the machine shop post reminded me of something that happened a very long time ago with a college-educated engineer. When I was in the Boy Scouts, I was the troop quartermaster for a while. We needed a place to store and organize our camping gear, tents, Dutch ovens, etc. One of the guys' dads was said engineer and volunteered to supervise building some shelving for the small closet we had to store the gear in. He produced very professional blueprints. Yes, for simple shelves. I was only 13 or 14 at the time, but my dad was a self-employed carpenter and took me along on jobs when not in school as his helper, so I knew how to read blueprints and a bit about building shelves from wood. I took one look at the plans and saw a very big problem and tried to point out his mistake, which was my mistake. To say he was highly put out by being corrected by a kid was an understatement. Lots of words like, "I know what I'm doing, it'll work, don't worry." The usual engineer self-righteous babble. So me being me, I shut up and backed off. His plan to get the shelf into the small closet? Build it in two halves and put each half in and then attach them together. But he had no support under the split down the middle of each shelf. We got it built, installed, and he was quite proud of himself. "See, it's fine." "Okay," says me, "let's get all the gear stowed." First the tent, canvas about 10 pounds, went up on the top shelf, in the middle, right at the split, and it went right through that shelf and all the other shelves all the way to the floor. An entire Saturday wasted. He stood there dumbfounded and speechless. I looked at him and said, "It needs supports under the shelves that aren't cut in the middle." Next week, I came to the troop meeting and looked in the closet. Supports installed, gear arranged. He never spoke of it again. Isn't like the whole point of the Boy Scouts things to try to empower the kids? Nothing like somebody who's working in the Boy Scouts who has such an inferiority complex that they can't allow themselves to be upstaged by somebody younger than them in any way. G. Gibby wrote, "The worst part is that the dad completely missed the point of scouting. He had an opportunity to guide you in the design and build process so you could learn and demonstrate a skill and then claim ownership of the result." Our next story is, do exactly and only as told. Okay. Take holiday ASAP. Okay. Check emails on holiday. Okay, but it'll cost you in the long run. Story of malicious compliance and upwards management from a decade ago. Usual caveats, names changed, writing on mobile, and English as second language. To set the scene, recently direct employed at UK HQ for a sizable national business-to-business company that I'd contracted for. Me is me, your OP. Bob is my new micromanaging boss. Jim is my nice hiring manager. The guy who talked me into joining rather than continuing on contracts only. The guy who talked me into joining rather than continuing on contracts only. The guy who talked me into joining rather than continuing on contracts, only mentioned as his warning to cover my rear with Bob made this possible. So, to the story before you lose interest. Bob started our relationship with a request for a one-on-one meeting to understand my role, as it was one they'd never experienced, except as an end stakeholder. Seems promising, so I prepare a concise but thorough briefing presentation to outline core deliverables and resource allocations as they stood. Dear reader, I lie not. Second slide showing the period spread of legal and corporate compliance activities was up for 3 seconds when I was instructed to cease presenting and dress down as follows. Paraphrased for expediency and clarity, as Bob had, as I later learned, a tendency to ramble on tangential lines. Do you presume to instruct me, a board director, your superior in all aspects and your direct manager, on how to run my subordinates? I reply, no. I presumed that you called this meeting to familiarize the key deliverables and legal requirements of a business area that was hitherto the exclusive remit of Jim. If this was a misinterpretation on my part, I apologize and... Bob, cutting me off, said, "That's quite enough. You are here to be told what, how, and when to do your job." I'm having a mental replay of overheard breakroom conversations about Bob's need to control everything. Bob continuing as I settle into the at-ease pose adopted by frequently disciplined grammar schoolboys and military recruits. I am in charge. I give instructions and you treat anything that could be construed as a request as a direct order. The only time I want to hear from you is for clarifications, authorizations, or to confirm that you have received, understood, and actioned my orders. My blood was rushing in my ears. The nails on both hands were close to splitting my palms, but I knew anything I said would end badly for my salary, and I'd have to play nice. Me almost gritting my teeth. Understood. May I clarify one thing, please? Bob, with a look of utter contempt, said, "What exactly was unclear from what I just said?" Me reverting to a customer service developed poop-eating tone. Nothing was unclear, only you omitted to reveal how and when I am to receive orders. Bob, turning crimson, said, "Email when it hits your inbox. My PA will have minutes of this meeting ready before you've made it back to your desk. Now out. I am too senior to waste more time on this." About 6 months later, after fastidious compliance with directives issued to me, mostly via Bob's nice but very timid PA, and careful cover my A, archiving all of comms and backups to keep us legal, and I add, all whilst discreetly exploring alternative career options, both within and outside the company, I am in receipt of a meeting invitation to attend Bob's office. At last, the order came forth with opportunity for malicious compliance that started the avalanche. Bob, not looking up from their monitor, said, "OP, I need you to book 2 weeks holiday to be taken ASAP. This off-the-record request is your #1 priority." Klaxons going off in my head. I'm about to be stood up to take the fall for the state our compliance submissions had fallen into. Luckily, I did everything legally required of me. I'm not responsible under policy or law for the compliance, only what I am told to do. Me deciding this is my chance to goad Bob's ego, I say 2 weeks ASAP. Gladly, I can hand over everything by the end of this week, and I did get ahead of the monthlies in case you forgot to request them, so could start with the next week and the week after. Bob, looking oddly relieved and making eye contact, said, "PA will process and authorize. Those monthlies better be perfect. You are dismissed." Friday comes and the anticipated flurry of the last-minute requests and instructions come through. Amongst the laundry list was the utter gem I had hoped for. A direct email, not PA acting as, with instruction to keep company phone with me at all times and to keep regular, twice daily contact throughout the 2 weeks. No one asked what I was doing with my impromptu 2 weeks away from the office. I was fortunate to have the chance to fly halfway around the world to stay with my brother. 20 minutes booking flights, no luggage or hotel costs to worry over. Remember that order to be online? Early 2010s data costs were insane. Add roaming, you get where this goes. I dutifully followed orders and ate roaming data like a social media obsessed teenager. I logged hours and dutifully submitted them to payroll. I drank like a fish and had the best time with my brother. End of the month, I'm back and being a good peon with my head down and keyboard clicking when the calendar entry pings in. Seems I am to be favored with another face-to-face. I have an idea of what is coming, but oh boy. Bob, appearing in the middle of a meltdown, said, "What the heck have you done?" Going lowercase to save your eyes, but this was at fire alarm in your ear volume. "You have caused incalculable damage to my reputation in this company. The other board and Jim were laughing at me, saying I can't control you. You're out. You're over. You're..." Me interrupting in parade ground voice, standing to my full 6'4". I said, "I'm covered. Your hubris and ineptitude are laughable. If I'm out, it'll be my choosing and with a clean sheet. Jim knows full well that I wouldn't drop the ball on compliance regardless of you meddling in things you're not even aware of. Everything you forgot is covered except your own backside. You're not even peer-worthy, let alone superior to me, even though you may be higher ranking." Yes, I got that from a film I can't remember, but this part is crystal clear. "I bid you good day." I turned 180 and walked out of the office into stunned silence across the open plan 100-seat floor and back down to my desk. The fallout: I enjoyed the inevitable HR session chaired by Jim. I promised not to use any manner that might be deemed threatening for 6 months. I was also returned to reporting to Jim, who reinstated my OT plus TIL for the time I worked on holiday and let me get back to keeping things compliant. Bob did indeed have a full meltdown soon after. My show of assertion crumbled the empire of fear. They left to enjoy early retirement and faded into memory. Honestly, I feel like this story read like either one of two things. One of the best off-the-cuff yelling back at your boss exchanges ever, or a Redditor's wet dream, with a perfect capstone of, "I bid you good day." Algie888 wrote, "Had a yelling match with an acting foreman once that still warms me. I'd gotten into it with another employee who ran squealing right to him. He said, 'Did you know that he is the acting lead hand today?' I said no, and don't care. I'm trying to get this done on time. So I told him to help or get out of my way. He says, 'You can't tell him what to do. You need to respect your coworker.' I said, If I ever see him ever do a lick of work, then maybe, just maybe I'll call him a coworker. But until then, he's just someone you pay to be here." All said in front of the lazy, squealing employee. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.